Okay, welcome. This is episode 4 of Complete Sports Care's Q&A. Today I have with me recently retired Diamonds and Vixens netballer Caitlin Thwaites. Thanks for joining us, Caitlin.
Hi, thanks for having me in my bedroom and nearly your bedroom too.
Well, it is, yeah, my office just off my bedroom. You can see the bed in the background there. So today I wanted to have a bit of a chat about preparation and strength and conditioning, just from an athlete's perspective. But we'll start up just with a bit of a few other sort of more personal questions. So you've obviously had an amazing career as a sports person, you know, a list of achievements and awards that probably almost too much for me to list now, but some would say your greatest achievement is actually putting up with me during your childhood. So what is your most memorable moment of us growing up together?
Well, I don't think I've got specific memorable moments that pop into mind, but I will say that the fact that I ended up having being an athlete and heading down the sporting path was actually influenced by my big brother. I think a lot of the time siblings who you become quite competitive and wanting to get out there and do similar things to what your older sibling is doing, and that was definitely the case for me and how I found volleyball. So initially for me, I was juggling both netball and volleyball and ended up playing in the national team for volleyball. And that was purely because my big brother had chosen it as a sport to do at high school. And I followed you down that path and really enjoyed and loved my time playing volleyball. So I will say that you've not going to give you all the credit as to as to why I ended up being an athlete, but yeah, you've definitely had an influence on my career.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say, but you've definitely outshone me in every single sporting arena. So it's really been good to follow your career over the last little while. So, but I'll put that feather in my cap. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And obviously the next frontier for you, parenthood. So for those of you who aren't aware, you're expecting and you haven't got long to go.
Yep, you can't quite see my baby bump there, but I'm hiding it under the screen.
So what are you most looking forward to, but also what are you most fearful of with that next phase of your life?
Well, I think it's been just an interesting phase for my life, transitioning out of being an athlete. That transition can be quite stressful for athletes as it is, because you've identified as this one thing your whole life, and then all of a sudden you're not that anymore. So that's one transition in itself, and then the transition going through pregnancy and into parenthood is the other part of it. But I think it's probably been a really good thing for me, because I have been able to shift my focus immediately from this thing that was all encompassing, not only for me, but for our entire family, because of how, supportive our family have been of my sporting career, and now to shift that into my focus and my energy into growing a baby. And so I think it's been a good thing for me in that transition, I think.
So 18 seasons of National League Netball. It's fair to say you've had a bit of experience with a pre-season. Firstly, did you ever look forward to this time of year?
I think towards the back end of my career, I was more, I would look forward to it a bit more, but it's always been something that for me that has been met with a certain level of dread, because the phase and the type of training that you go through, you always know that your body is going to be incredibly sore for a long period of time, because you're going from sometimes a level of not training as much or not stressing your body in a certain way, to then stressing your body in a certain way a lot. So I think in my mind, especially because the physical side of things for me, it's not necessarily been, I'm not the fittest out there on the court, and I'm not the one that's setting the pace, doing the bloody 1K time trials or whatever it is activity that we've got going on. I'm usually one of the ones that's up the back. So I think you find that you enjoy the things that you're good at. And so it's been something, I think, for me that I've always struggled at. But I've found that that's been a really interesting thing too, as I've gotten older. Just the way that as an older athlete, you are one of the more experienced, people, and heading into a preseason, it's been interesting to for me in terms of that leadership side of things, to be able to still be a presence and a leader, even though it might not be the activity that you're the best at and that you're the strongest at. So finding those different ways to be able to contribute to the team, even though it might be me and a couple of the others bringing up the rear in those running exercises.
But I'm sure there would have been aspects of pre-season that you probably would have been good at, or better than better than some other aspects as well. So I would imagine things like your max deadlift or your max squat you would have been quite competitive with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where some of the I enjoy and relish my time in the gym, because that's an area that I'm better at and that I'm stronger at. So that's the time in the gym and being able to focus on the things that you're good at is also a really good balance. And that's where I think as well I've found that the people that are good at those things. So I'll be probably a bit more vocal and try to bring the others along in terms of those gym and weight sessions, as a team athlete. And then in the running activities and things that I might struggle a bit more, the other girls kind of, they'll be the ones that are leading the way and helping me out along the way. So it's that's what I love. One of the things I love about being in a team sport.
So preparing for season, what's involved? Like, let's break it down. So the different things in terms of, starting off, testing, thinking about your program organisation, all that sort of stuff. So give us a bit of a heads up. What's involved?
Well, I think there's definitely been an evolution across my career and the way that sports science and things has kind of developed. And the way that we have done things within netball. So we used to do a lot of those, boot camp style camps and absolutely flogging you until you're, waking up, sleep deprivation, doing runs in the middle of the night and, pushing you physically and mentally. And I've got some great memories and great stories from all of those things, but the last few years they've kind of moved away from doing things like that, purely because there's more science behind the way that we can train that is smarter, not harder, and reducing the amount of injury risk, I guess, involved in some of those things. There's definitely still a place for sometimes where you're physically being pushed or mentally being pushed through physical activity, and a lot of that is actually getting through it as a team and seeing, can we push you in this point and feel pressure and you guys manage to kind of get yourselves through it as a team together. The trends through sport has definitely changed. We do a lot more mass running and things now, so it's actually calculated distances due to what your test score might have been on the yo-yo. So your distances and time and things are very scientific behind it, but the amount of the time that you need to get from this distance to that distance, and then they might put in a change of direction, or change the distance and push you a bit further to get there within those certain periods of time. So so I think there's definitely been that evolution across the 18 seasons that I played. But I think as well the testing, the emphasis on the testing, I think a lot of people used to get a really big sense of anxiety around testing, because probably the old school mentality was it used to be used as a selection tool. So if you didn't make certain targets or whatever, then you wouldn't be picked in teams. Whereas I think once and our sport as an entirety has reached a certain level of high performance behavior, where everybody is actually, you're trying your darndest, and there's nobody that's kind of cutting corners and trying to pull one over the strength and conditioning and, oh yeah, I went and did that session. No, but actually didn't. Once you've got the standard of high performance behaviors and the level of people being able to push themselves, it's much easier for them to kind of go, well, it's not being used as a selection tool. We just want you to compare yourself to you, not compare yourself to everybody else in the team. Firstly, that's incredibly unrealistic in terms of what's required of the positions on the court, because there's no way I'd be running the same types of level of numbers as what a centre would be doing. It's just silly. But also the type of goal shooter that I am is different to other goal shooters.
Absolutely. So how do they break down a pre-season? As you say, you've highlighted it's sort of very individual now, and that's based on a lot of testing and things at the very start of the pre-season. How do they break down in terms of over the course of the pre-season? Are you looking at you start with sort of a lot of conditioning, so maybe as you were talking about your mass running, fair bit of strength stuff, and then you're moving into more skill and game sense and match preparation later on in the season, or do you start that at the start as well? How does that get broken down?
Yeah, so strength and conditioning wise, we generally will have more of a conditioning block at the very start of pre-season, and then that kind of trend it's quite annoying because they keep shifting the targets, so you don't ever feel like, oh, okay, we've done this running session and I'm getting better at it, because they keep, like with the mass running stuff, they keep increasing your distances, so you're always constantly feeling like, oh, I just didn't quite make that last rep or whatever it is. They keep shifting the posts, so you go, oh, so it's actually quite nice to go back and do one of the sessions that you did at the very start, because you can kind of go, oh, well, I've seen my progress and I'm actually better at that session that we did at the very start. I'm smashing that now. But yeah, so the conditioning block usually will last for a good 6 to 8 weeks in the lead up to get a certain level of of running and load into your legs and things. Of course, and then sort of closer to season, we'll go into more of a strength and power phase. So that's dealing with the speed of weights and things, not necessarily. So but again, it is individualized. So if there's a specific athlete who they literally just want to go, we just want you to get stronger, there's times and things kind of where it's more appropriate to try and do that. But the focus on kind of that power phase more leading into the start of a season. And we used to actually do the majority of our, not start the court work stuff when pre-season started. So we would mainly do physical conditioning and weights and things, and then bring in court work gradually later. But that's actually changed in recent years as well, where we start the physical stuff, we're starting on court stuff at the exact same time. So that's, I guess, the shortish turnarounds that you have during an off season and wanting to actually build and get those skills and things back, because you do get a bit rusty those first couple of court work sessions back. There's a lot more sprayed balls because you're not sure, oh, actually I thought I could put that ball out that far for you, and it wasn't quite accurate on my pass. So so they've actually started putting the court work training in at the very start of pre-season as well.
So your last season was memorable for quite a few reasons, but one of the big ones was probably the pandemic. So how did this affect your preparation, and what had to change during that period?
Well, we're talking about periodization and the running and conditioning blocks that I don't like. um, Firstly, that got dragged out. We did about 3 running blocks, 3 conditioning blocks,
And
because
this was just because the change of the season and the start date kept changing. Is that right?
yeah. So initially, like, the season got put on hold, and we didn't know if we were going to have a season. There were so many factors that changed. We went here in Victoria. We went from being able to train and do everything with our teammates to not having access to any of our facilities. So incredibly grateful for the support of the VIS and the fact that they loaned out all of their equipment so that we could have a bit of a setup of things that we could do at home. But as a team athlete, not being able to train with your teammates, especially for the skill components, doing some of the running and the weights and things, as much as we didn't have the big heavy weights that we would normally have access to, modifying to body weight circuits and things with medicine balls and things like that was the best that we had on offer. But one of the difficult things for me during that running phase was I didn't really feel, there's a track up the road that I would sneak between the fence and do some of my running on the track, but I felt a bit dodgy doing that because I knew I wasn't allowed to be doing that. But I started doing a lot of my running on the grass oval that's kind of behind my house. And I felt so slow running on grass. And so I just wasn't making the distances and things that I was meant to be doing. And so for me to actually feel like I was achieving the sessions that had been put out for me, I started doing some of those running sessions on concrete. So for my body to adapt to, my older knees and ankles and things, to kind of deal with the fact that I was doing a lot of the running on concrete, because that's all that was kind of available to me. And if I was doing them on grass, I just wasn't getting there.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a mental thing for me. I could have kept going on the grass and just felt really shit about myself because I wasn't achieving the targets that I was meant to be achieving. And I had multiple conversations with our strength and conditioning about that. And as long as my body wasn't kind of, suffering and having injuries as a result of putting load through my legs and things with concrete, then I was kind of okay to do that every now and then, as opposed to being used to doing that stuff on softer cushioned surfaces. So I mean, so many different challenges that we had. We also, so once the season was kind of set in place, we had here in Melbourne, we were doing agility sessions in our driveway on Zoom with the computer. I had some stubby holders from the kitchen cupboard being used as the cones for my agility things. I think the neighbours all thought that I was nuts, but that was the way that we had to run our pre-season, our training, because we just didn't have access to the facilities and things that we normally would. Which in turn makes you very grateful for the things that you're, that you're very used to in terms of the high performance environment that we normally have access to. But so that was one thing. We went from normally having 1 game a week to now they changed the rules to try and get the season into a hub. And we went off and had a hub season, but we played 2 games a week rather than 1 game a week, so that it was less time for us to be away. And that in itself, I guess, was a fairly big factor in changing the way that we needed to be training as well, because it was less recovery time. There were some days where we had to be playing, I think it was a 2-day turnaround, which was the shortest turnaround that we had in between games. So all of those things obviously affect the way that you're able to perform, but also the way that we needed to train in order to adapt and have our bodies being able to not suffer as a result, or our performance not suffer as a result of those factors.
One other big change for you in the same time period was changing your position. So you moved from goal shooter to goal attack, or a combination of both.
Yep.
How did your preparation change because of that?
Well, it turned out that the 3 running phases that we ended up being in because of the periodization and even I will say even in that, I know athletes thrive on being in control and knowing where you're at in terms of things. And I'm sure, things like with the Olympics and things like that, things have been thrown into, if you don't actually know where you need to be peaking and where you need to be performing, well, then all of this gets shifted as well. So the fact that initially when the season got cancelled, we kind of went, well, now we don't know what training phase we're in. Do we just keep going? And then the season kind of went, okay, well, now we've got a start date. So then, but we'd kind of already dragged out the conditioning phase, threefold, because the season kept getting pushed back and pushed back. So that actually, as much as I hated it, was probably one thing that benefited me a little bit, because it meant that I could have a greater amount of time in that getting myself fitter, in order to play that different position, because I'd spent 17 seasons playing goal shooter with probably only a handful of minutes being put out at goal attack, to playing a lot more goal attack. But I think the staff, the medical staff and the conditioning staff, but also the coaching staff, were incredibly smart about the way that they actually managed that for me. So when we were able to train at the same time, it started out probably being put into goal attack in practice games, or just scrimmages that we were having at training, for maybe a quarter or a half. And then as a few weeks went on of me being able to do that, then there was 1 or 2 days where they would put me there for 3 quarters. So kind of building my capacity to be able to do that. And it wasn't actually until I think it was probably around 7 or 8 of the season, when we were up in Queensland, that I actually played a full 60-minute game at goal attack. So we utilised another rule, and another change that came into the game was rolling subs, and the coaching staff actually used that to a great advantage. Strategically it was great as well, because we've got 3 goalers that play really differently and have got great strengths amongst our team. So strategically, that was a great benefit for us. But not until sort of round 8 or 9 was it that I played a full 60 minutes at goal attack. And I remember coming off the court, it was against one of the more physical teams that we'd played as well. Came off the court, and the girl who has been used to playing goal attack for a long period of time, she came over and just put her arms around me, and I started pissing myself laughing. I was like, why do you do this to yourself, Tegan? It was the hardest physical game, and also the hardest for me to have sucked it up and done that for 60 minutes. It was that was a bit of a turning point. But again, for the coaches to understand and know that was something that, if they were going to be looking at heading into finals, for me to know that I could run that out for 60 minutes in a grand final if I needed to, it was really smart the way that they managed that psychologically for me, to kind of build in confidence, but also the way that that we managed to do that across the season and build that capacity. But I can tell you my body hurt a lot more playing goal attack than it did playing shooter, just because of that's what I was used to.